Bye bye. Okay, so moving on today. So first of all, I would like to say something before I introduce Kristi White, that this is practically the Indigenous week for us. And we're having a lot of, we are celebrating the Indigenous. The third annual food drive for the Indigenous people is going on right now, and donations are being collected until the October 7th. Please connect with USMA, donate heartfully, and open your heart to the Indigenous and to the community, and show your care and love for them. Also, there are various activities going on, and USMA has posted in the groups, in the WhatsApp group. Try to please participate just to show your consolidation with them. We have Kristi White today, and let me introduce Kristi White. This is her second time with us. We have known the Indigenous so well just by knowing Kristi White herself. And Kristi White is basically a proud Haudenosaunee woman. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Kristi, Haudenosaunee. White woman. It's always very intriguing for me, this name. So you might would want to pronounce it perfectly for us later on. She's a mother, a grandmother, and she creates a story with books that open the hearts and minds of children from all walks of life, inspiring them to read deeper, search further, and explore their creative gifts. Taking inspiration from Indigenous cultures, she focuses on themes that encourage independence of the spirit, enthusiasm for learning, and acceptance of other languages, cultures, and traditions. Kristi is also an award-winning advocate, educator on many Indigenous topics and platforms. So today she's going to be talking about the Indigenous truth and reconciliation. So over to you, Kristi White. Thank you. First of all, thank you for being with us today. And over to you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. Sugali, I'm Kristi White. I am a proud Haudenosaunee woman from Oneida Nation of the Thames. I'm here to talk about reconciliation and kind of what that looks like through the time. So one of the things I did is I'm going to try, this is all new for me. I can't share my presentation. So the first thing I wanted to point out is on the 30th was Red Shirt Day and Truth and Reconciliation.
Kristi, do you want us to make you co-host? So you want to share your screen?
Yes, please. Could I?
Sugi,
Yes.
can you?
Yes, she's already made the co-host. Kristi, do you want to try again?
Okay. Let's see if it'll. Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay. We are learning together.
That's one thing about Indigenous community is we don't get a lot of technology. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to be able to, I don't know if I can move my screen of everybody else on top of it. Okay, so it must be like this. Okay, so we're going to start off. Everyone can see the first slide?
Yes.
Okay, so wearing your orange shirt is a wonderful way to show your support, but one of the most effective actions you can take towards truth and reconciliation is educating yourself and those around you. Most Canadians and newcomers have never been taught the history. Learning about the topics below will provide a context for understanding current realities for Indigenous people today and how we got there. This is one thing I really like to cover is actually the diversity of all First Nations and Métis nations. So on here you see there's actually hundreds of distinct First Nations and Métis nations across Turtle Island, which is now Canada. Attempts by the Canadian government to eradicate Indigenous nations has led to a common misconception whereby Indigenous peoples are often not respected as a diverse, independent nations that they all are. Overall, there is an estimated 1.6 million Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island. As of 2016, comprised of hundreds of independent nations with unique histories, traditions, languages. Amongst the indigenous population in Turtle Island, there's at least 53 unique languages. So that's one of the first things I like to share, is because one of the things I think that in Truth and Reconciliation that is still not fully understood is how many diverse nations across Canada that there is of Indigenous people. We're not just one nation. We don't actually practice all the same ceremonies, and we have very different languages. By the way, if anyone along the way has questions, please interrupt me. I'm okay with that, and it's better. Go ahead, Asma.
So, Kristi, thank you so much for sharing this. Day before yesterday, I am on Red FM to outreach the programs of Malton Women Council, and obviously I shared about today's program and our food drive, as well as the event on October 7th. So somebody asked me this question: what is the language? And I didn't know that. So the host, she Googled and she just shared that there are different languages, different accents, but we don't know about it. So thank you so much for sharing this. And I think
oh, sorry, Asma.
Yeah, and I think the main purpose of inviting you today is to educate us, to inform us, because there are so many missing things. Yes, we can read it, we can Google it, but it's good to have a person like you who can directly, who can share with us, and we are here to ask questions. Thank you so much for that. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you. So yeah, I've put together the slides, and a lot of them have a lot of information. So again, as I said, if anyone has questions, and I may not see your hand go up because I'm kind of flipping between the two pages. So, I mean, by all means, chime in, ask your question, to say, hey, Kristi, can you answer something for me? So that's one of the things that we talk about, is the different languages, that we're not all the same tribal nations. We have different beliefs, those kinds of things, because I think it really is a misconception that we all are kind of one and the same. The other thing I wanted to clarify before we go any further, I usually do this at the beginning, is I wanted to remind everybody I'm not actually teaching Indigenous history here or Indigenous culture. I'm actually teaching Canadian history. And that's something that we need to be really wary of, is the fact that this is actually Canadian history that we're teaching. And actually, some of these slides will be pre-Canada history. Can everybody see this slide?
So, Kristi, one more thing. Maybe we are not aware of many things, any protocol or anything. So if we ask something which may offend somebody, right? So I apologize in advance, because we don't know. And the way you are saying, this is the same, like we are from South Asian culture, but we all have different languages, different cultures, but we are considered as one South Asian family. And let me translate it. Maybe somebody is here who has limited English. तो आज हम जो बात कर रहे हैं, जो September 30th को, आप सबको पता है कि हम लोगों ने एक दिन सेलिब्रेट किया था, जिसे यहाँ ऑरेंज डे भी कहा जाता है, जो यहाँ ट्रूथ एंड रिकंसिलिएशन डे मनाया जाता है. स्कूलों में भी इसकी अवेयरनेस है. तो आज क्रिस्टी वाइट हमसे कनाडा की हिस्ट्री शेयर कर रही हैं. वो बता रही हैं कि ये दिन हम क्यों मनाते हैं, इसके पीछे क्या ऐसे अवामिल थे या ऐसी क्या बातें थी जिनकी वजह से हम इस डे को, अब अनफॉर्चुनेटली ये कोई वो बहुत खुशी का दिन नहीं है, लेकिन हम इसको सेलिब्रेट करते हैं. और आज हम सब लोग इसीलिए जमा हुए हैं कि हम क्रिस्टी से सुन सकें. Back to you, Kristi.
Thank you. Actually, that's another good point before I get to the next slide. I want everybody to understand that this is a very safe, comfortable space. I understand that we are all on the journey of just learning. Even a lot of Indigenous people, as you'll see once we get further into the slides, are just learning our own history too. So I think it's really important for people to ask questions and to also have a space to ask those questions and not feel like they're going to offend anybody. So please, any question you have, never worry about offending. I think it's always in the context and the way you ask it, and this is a learning space, so I think it's important that questions are asked and they are answered. Okay. Asma, you're just gonna have to key up and let me know that you can see the slide when I put it up.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So this is the doctrine of discovery. And what a lot of people don't know is the doctrine of discovery actually affected countries around the world and still do to this day. And it's one thing in the whole part of this history that a lot of people don't know is that the doctrine of discovery, also known as the terra nullius, meaning nobody's land, is a series of formal statements from the Pope in the 1400s, which stated that European explorers could claim land for European countries and monarchies because North Americans' inhabitants were not practicing Christian people and therefore did not have rights. The doctrine of discovery paved the way for the settlement of lands, deceptive treaties, confederation, the Indian Act, and residential schools. Modern court rulings continue to interpret legal claims relying on the doctrine of discovery to justify occupation of lands. There are calls for both the Canadian government and the Pope to formally renounce the doctrine to recognize the obligation Canada has towards First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So, one thing about the doctrine of discovery, as I said beforehand, is it's actually something that is used in many, many countries. And it was how they were able to erect mission schools around the world. And so that's one thing I point out too, is that there is actually no difference between mission schools and residential schools here in Canada. The only difference is there's a period of time that the government changed the wording. That's the only difference. And so there's a lot of things here in Canada today. I don't know if you know on the news, the federal government is continually fighting Indigenous children when they win human rights cases. And how they're actually fighting it is still using the doctrine of discovery today in Canada. Now we're into the Indian Act. Can you see this slide? The Indian Act is a piece of legislation that was created to dominate and control Indigenous peoples and assimilate them into the mainstream Canadian society. It formally came into effect in 1876 and is still in force today. The Indian Act forced Indigenous peoples onto reserve, causing mass dislocation. A pass system of racial segregation was implemented where Indigenous peoples could not leave the reserve without a pass from the Indian agent. That was the government official appointed to live on reserve. Additionally, the Indian Act stripped Indigenous nations of their political and governance structures by enforcing a Western European democracy elected chief and council system modeled after and accountable to the colonial government. The Indian Act also outlawed cultural and spiritual practices. First Nation people were not allowed to express their identities or culture through traditional ceremonies or speaking their languages. Additionally, the Indian Act required Indigenous children to attend residential schools. The Act of 1876 made the education of First Nations groups a federal responsibility. The government was authorized to contract with different provinces as well as with the church authorities to establish boarding schools for Indigenous education. The Indian Act empowered the Minister of Indian Affairs to enroll and place all Indigenous children, excluding for many years the Métis, in school. The Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, was very clear about the need to sever the connection between the student and their Indigenous communities. When the school is on reserve, the child lives with his parents, who are savages. He is surrounded by the savages, and though he may learn to read and write, his habits and training and mode of thought are Indian. He is simply a savage who can read and write.
One question, can I say? You are saying Indian government, that was a really Indian government or East Indian government? Western Indian. You're saying that
So here in Canada,
yeah,
I have a slide coming up that'll actually explain that. Here in Canada, they are still using the words Indian and Indian Act. So even though we have been taught that it's completely inappropriate and that we are Indigenous people to Canada, to this day, Canada still calls us Indians under the Indian Act of Canada.
that is original India or Western Indies, West Indies. That was
Here.
from India.
Can I interrupt, Kristi?
Yep.
Narendra ji, the Indigenous were originally called the Indians. We're not talking about the East Indians.
Oh, West Indies, West Indian.
That Indian is something else. You know how the Indigenous in America and Canada were called Indians, Red Indians and all? Those Indians that she's talking about. Not you and me. Okay, thank you, Kristi.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Continue.
I have on that note, I have a question. Anybody
Yes.
from the home country know what are we called over there? Is there a different word?
Pardon?
Yeah, it's known as Red Indians.
Okay. Oh, that was same here for generations. I grew up with everybody knowing us as Redskins. So
Yeah.
it's the same. Okay.
So Kristi, your question was like in home country you called something else or no? I think we lost the connection to Kristi. I think she'll be back.
I think Kristi is here. She just off her screen. Her name is there. So let's see. So Sher Sagu ji, बड़े अरसे के बाद आए हैं. Thank you so much for joining.
सुना.
शेर सगु जी आवाज आ रही है? नहीं आ रही, वरना स्माइल आ जाती है उनके चेहरे पे.
Mute. He is mute.
तो नरेंद्र आंटी, हमारे जब ये लोग इंडियंस कहते हैं ना, तो इंडियन एक्ट की बात करते हैं, तो वो कनाडा में इंडियन एक्ट जो है वो इंडिजिनस लोगों के लिए है, जिन्हें हम रेड इंडियंस कहते थे अपनी जबान में. और हमें एक चीज बताई जाती थी कि जैसे अभी भी इनके उसमें भी था कि जैसे ये लोग जंगली हैं, इन्हें कल्चर का नहीं पता. ठीक है, वो यही बात कर रही हैं कि इनके बच्चे इनसे ले लिए गए कि बच्चे को ये लोग क्या सिखाएंगे. तो जैसे हम लोग यहाँ हैं, हम अभी हिंदी में बात कर रहे हैं, पंजाबी में बात कर रहे हैं, हम मंदिर मस्जिद जहां भी हम जाना चाहते हैं, हम अपनी प्रैक्टिस रख रहे हैं, हम अपना कल्चर अपने साथ रखना चाहते हैं, बेशक हम एक और मुल्क में. तो आप सोचें कि कोई और हमारे मुल्क में आ जाए, हमसे हमारा कल्चर ले ले, हमसे हमारे बच्चे ले लें, कि कहीं हम अपने बच्चों को वो कल्चर ना सिखा दें. ठीक है, तो ये इनके साथ ये हुआ है, जो दुख की बात है, बहुत दुख की बात है. आप सोचें कि हमसे हमारी सकाफत ले लें, हमारा कल्चर ले लें, हमारी जुबान ले लें, तो हमें कैसा लगेगा. तो इन सब के साथ ये हुआ. कितने अरसे तक इनके बच्चे जो थे वो रेजिडेंशियल स्कूल में चले गए.
और नरेंद्र जी, इनको ना इंडियंस इसलिए कहते थे क्योंकि गोरे अपने आप को सेपरेट करते थे एज वाइट्स, और बाकी सबको वो डिफरेंट को ब्राउन्स करते थे या इंडियंस कहते थे. तो वो हमें भी इंडियंस कहते थे जो सब कॉन्टिनेंट में थे, और इनको रेड इंडियंस कहते थे क्योंकि ये थोड़े से हमसे डिफरेंट थे.
Because they were in search of India and they couldn't find it, and they found only West Indies islands, and they started calling them the West Indies. These were small islands, and the people of those islands were called these Indians, Red Indians.
So West Indies is different.
Actually, they are all different. West Indians, Red Indians, yeah. Indigenous people, they are ancestor of this Canada, yeah, primitive people of Canada. So उनके लिए ये indigenous जो है Canada के है. Those are who are अपना really जो इनके हैं, जो higher हैं Canada के, उनको ये indigenous people ये
जी.
उनके लिए जो रेजिडेंशियल स्कूल जो उनके लिए खोले थे कंपल्सरी, उनको बच्चों को ले जाते थे, तो उनके लिए दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट रेजिडेंशियल.
जैसे इंडिया में कह रहे थे आदिवासी
हाँ जी,
Adivasi, there are tribes, not tribe. They are original
वैसे ही इनको भी ट्रीट करते
fire
थे
of Canada. पहले यही थे indigenous people. उसके बाद ये सारा.
so Kristi, good to have you back. Madan ji has a question.
I think why they call Indians, I may be wrong, but when Vasco da Gama, he went to discover India, he reached America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he reached America, he thought he reached India.
Mhm.
The peoples he met, they look like some, but in his own mind, what the Indians look like. So he started calling them Indians. So he thought he reached India, but actually he reached America, which is all North America now, and then split afterward to United States of America and Canada. But originally in 13th, 14th century, it was all one part. So that's, I believe, it is that why they called Indian, because of his impression that he reached India.
yeah
I also
I
know
may be
that.
wrong, but
I
can
also know that.
confirm it.
okay
Mhm.
thank you
That's
Actually,
actually
so they are
Continue.
native. They are native of the Canadian, Canada. That's why they
Yeah.
are called indigenous, native.
Yes. Over to you, Kristi.
Oh, well, I got kicked out there for half a second. Actually, that is exactly why they called us Indians, is because when Christopher Columbus had thought he landed in India, he landed in the US, and then it just derived from there that we were Indians. Okay. And then, so this one here, residential schools were government mandated. Church-run boarding schools that Indigenous children were forced to attend for over 150 years. Indigenous children were taken from their families into the communities and sent to the school, often not returning to their families for many years or not returning at all. The school sought to destroy Indigenous cultures and languages and to assimilate Indigenous peoples so that they no longer existed as distinct peoples. TRC 2015. Residential schools were generally underfunded and overcrowded. Children were harshly punished for speaking their own languages and were often not able to see their families or siblings. Many children do not return home from residential schools, and those who survived recount many forms of physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, and spiritual abuse. About 139 residential schools operated in Canada, with the last one closing in 1996. So that's one thing I'd like to talk about, is the fact that a lot of people don't realize that residential school system effect is happening right now to this day. To give you an example, in my home community, which is about 25 minutes out of a very large city, my home community is 25 minutes away from London, Ontario. We have no clean water, and our school was only turned over to the province in 1995. So my children will be the first ever generation to not be affected by their residential school system. So when you're shopping and you're out eating and you're visiting and you see those Indigenous families there, every single one of them up until 1996 is a residential school survivor. Yep.
So, Kristi, this is pretty harsh, and for such a long time, it says until 1996. That's not very far behind. It's a very harsh environment, I guess. It's a very harsh history. I'm sure it has impacted the Indigenous in a very dark way. What do you think? Can you enlighten us more about it? The impact of this when you say that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and that's the biggest thing, is a lot of people don't realize, like, under Indian Act law, it was law for our children to be taken from us. It was law that our children, it's not something that, we were accidentally convinced that this was a good thing. It was the fact that this was law in Canada, and the fact that under that Indian Act law, it still is in effect to today. And that's why I'm not a Canadian citizen. I'm an Indigenous citizen. And so under that means I'm governed under the Indian Act of Canada, which is still in existence to this day.
So you're talking about right now, you're still not a Canadian citizen. Is that so? Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And on the
That-
back of my card,
Yeah.
I'll let everybody know on the back of my Indian status card of Canada, it says my name, it says what tribal nation I'm from, and it says serial number.
Oh, wow. But recently, like we had heard in the news a year or so ago, not that long ago, I think it was last year, how they had discovered so many residential schools recently as well, and mass graves and all, and they had the government had said was sorry for it, was apologizing for the whole situation. Didn't that impact any of the situation right now in making you more of a Canadian citizen than an Indigenous citizen?
No, because the government still isn't telling the truth. To give you an example, my firstborn Canadian member went to Mohawk Institute. All of my family has gone to Mohawk Institute. We have family members that never returned home that are not listed as dead under the Canadian government. Those are the children that they are finding in those graves. They're undocumented children. So therefore, and if you go and look, the first grave was 217. We are over 10,000 Indigenous graves now found on a school. Please tell me any other country where there is a graveyard of babies and children undocumented on school grounds.
That's really sad.
And unfortunately, that's a lot of it is Canada has dictated how the history is taught and who it's taught to for a really, really long time, right? One thing, well, before I share the next thing, I just want everybody to think about is at one time, interestingly enough, the Indian Act was governed under immigration policy of Canada.
Wow. So it wouldn't be incorrect to say that all that hype about apologizing for the mass graves last year was only show and tell?
100%, because to this day, we have over 10,000 graves that have been found. And if this wasn't any other country, they would have taken to the streets by now.
Yes, that's true. That's
And
very
so a lot of this is the reason I bring up immigration policy. Let me go through we'll go to the next slide or two, and then I'll get to something where how I feel they have actually purposely severed the relationships between Indigenous people in Canada and newcomers to Canada. And why I think it is actually purposely set up that way, that we're not taught about each other and we're not exposed to each other's beautiful cultures and languages, because that would give us a really good understanding of each other. And that's how you build allyship, right?
Yes.
So the next slide. So Indian Day School, this is so important to me. In addition to residential schools, the federal government enforced attendance at Indian Day schools, which were mandated by the federal government and run by churches until the year 2000. While residential schools were boarding schools, often located far away, day schools were located within and around Indigenous communities, and students went home to their families in the evening. Day schools were another tool of assimilation where thousands of children suffered physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. About 699 Indian day schools operated in Canada.
Even now?
So up until 2000, residential day schools were still operating. And so one thing Canada hasn't even made clear is that all of these systems are one and the same. When you hear about residential school survivors and then you hear about day school survivors, the only thing they're not telling you is the only difference is they didn't spend the night there.
That's quite new, not so old thing.
Then we have another
And
thing that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yes, if we compare other countries, they are so much advanced. If we otherwise we say that Canada is very advanced, but still such type of schools are there and such type of culture is still there. So it should be improved, isn't?
What she means to say is that how we consider that Canada being a modern and Western country should be more towards justice, and we get to see so much of injustice in Canada as well. You know, how we condemn the justice going on back home, like in India, Pakistan. We condemn that injustice, whichever kind it is, we condemn it, whether it is any country. But and coming to Canada, immigrants have a feeling of that they're secure, have a secure feeling they're going to a very Western, just country, that they would be served justice, and then they get to know about the Indigenous history, and that's an eye opener.
And it is. And so to talk a little more about that, the best way I can explain it is where I come up with this theory of the shaking of the hands, as I say, between Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities. I do know, working with a lot of newcomers, that they would never come to Canada if Canada was ever designated by the UN as a genocidal country. What's interesting, as you find if you look it up in the news, the only person that's refusing to say Canada is a genocidal country is Justin Trudeau himself. And so through history, one of the things that we can look up later, Google, is there was something way back in the day called the Indian Trust Fund. And it was actually left by the British King to take care of the Indigenous people in Canada. And it was $2 trillion. Back in the 90s, Canada, some of the older ones here might remember, got a stimulus package. And Canada, for about a good week, was really curious on how they just came up with $2 million that they just found. But Canada stopped asking questions. And what they would have figured out is they had withdrawn it from the Indian Trust Fund. And so that's one of the issues that a lot of people aren't understanding when it comes to Indigenous issues, is the fact we don't use anybody else's money. There is money there that is ours and we are entitled to, that the Canadian government will not tell anybody that there is no reason for us to not have clean water. It is no reason for us to live in poverty. There's no reason for us to have the highest suicide rates, the highest incarceration rates, the highest addiction rates. There was no reason for it, except for every resource in Canada. So all the oil, all the trees, all of that is tied into the treaties. So Canada's main goal is, and in order to get rid of the Indian Act and for Canada to become owner of the treaties, they have to get rid of their quote unquote Indian problem. And that's why now Indigenous population is only 7% of the whole Canadian population, because it was a mass genocide for resources in Canada. So that's when it starts getting into what we call the 60 scoop and millennial scoop, which is new stuff that everyone might be hearing lately. The 60 scoops refers to the mass apprehension of Indigenous children for their families into the welfare system between 1951 and 1980s. Following the amendment to the Indian Act, Indigenous child welfare moved up under provincial jurisdiction during a time when racist policy permitted social work. Many Indigenous children were forcibly removed from their communities and placed with non-Indigenous families under the Eurocentric assumption that their parents were not properly caring for them, rather than recognizing the value of Indigenous children being in their communities and providing community resources to prevent apprehension. Provincial governments considered apprehension of Indigenous children the simplest way of addressing the child welfare issues. Thousands of Indigenous children were adopted by non-Indigenous families and in some cases sent abroad, causing intergenerational estrangement from their families, cultures, and identities. Thousands of Indigenous peoples today struggle with the intergenerational effects of the scoop as they strive to reconnect to their families, nations, cultures, identities, and spirituality. The trend of removing Indigenous children from their families continues in an alarming number today, as it comes to be referred to as the millennial scoop. In Canada, 52.2% of children in foster care are Indigenous, but only account for 7.7% of the population. I'll pause there for a minute. So in the 60s, right up until the 80s, I was actually one of those children. Our mothers had to fight to keep us because what was happening is if you were unwed, if you were Indigenous, they were coming in and literally taking your child from the hospital. Some of the cases that were documented is they would tell the mothers that they were going to bath their babies or clean them up, and they would never see them again.
So, Kristi.
Yeah.
My question is, when you say that most of the kids are in foster care are Indigenous, is there no law right now to take them back to the Indigenous community? The Indigenous community cannot have them back? There's no such law?
They are just starting to implement some frameworks. But again, because this has so been enrooted in every single system, it's just a starting point, right? A lot of systems have to change. We're just starting on the forefront of placing Indigenous children with Indigenous foster families. Like this is all really, really new, and also shows one thing I wanted to point out is when we're talking about the government and government accountability, we need to remember that the government, quote unquote, apologized for these atrocities in 2015. And that's when the TRC came up. And so what happened is why there was no healing out of that is when those graves were opened, what a lot of people don't understand is there was only 35 children in the whole existence of that school listed as dead. How is there 217 in a grave?
Oh, so the school has 35 on the record as dead?
The government has had only 35 listed on the records that they turned over to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So Canada got caught on a national scale of lying.
Wow.
So that's where some of that confusion is why even with the apology, well, the apology was in 2015. And then how many years later, there's a grave opened. And we have to remember, the government never opened that grave. It was survivors who pooled their money, who had to prove that what they're saying was truthful because the government wouldn't believe our elders. They wanted to peg them as liars or that they didn't know what they were talking about or because they were so old and it happened when they were kids, maybe they just didn't remember it right. Our survivors for years were told that they were lying. And it was one chief, when she asked her survivors, what can we do? That said, show them we're not lying. And they had that grave scanned.
That's great. But my question would be, Kristi, that how much of a say do you have, the Indigenous have right now in the government laws to take back the foster kids? Maybe you said it's coming on right now, but the process is still slow. It's just the beginning, right?
Because the Indian Act is still in effect today.
Okay.
I ask Canadians a lot of times, I know this is going to sound harsh, but to give you an example, I tell people all the time, if you pay Canadian taxes, then you're paying for your Indian law of Canada. What do you know about the Indian law of Canada that you're paying to keep implemented?
Thank you, Kristi. Uzma has a question, I think.
Yeah, Kristi, I just
Asma?
want to, yeah, I just want to know that after they apologize and we are celebrating September 30th, everybody's showing us solidarity. So what happened after that since 2003, from 2015 to 2000? Any progress, anything from government?
Okay, give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to. So, what came out of things so far? Can everybody see that?
Yes, please.
So, the TRC had 92 calls to action, and in 4 years, they've implemented 6.
Kristi, we lost the screen that you were showing before.
Oh, hang on.
Yes, now we can see it.
So, unfortunately, to answer your question, we haven't gotten anywhere.
A few years ago, we heard one of the news that in this residential school, they engraved that and they found so many skeletons of the human being. They were digging to make more building, and they found so many hundreds of the skeletons of human being. And they said this was a residential school, and the owner of those schools, people, they used to murder them and they buried them there.
And I think that's one thing that I really want to bring people attention to is the fact that as much as it's become a certain way, Indigenous people really want people to remember Orange Shirt Day is a memorial. It's not a celebration because they are still scanning schools as we're sitting here speaking. I was
that is no
talking to the school that my family went to, which is Mohawk Institute. It was the first residential school erected in Canada. They are still surveying the grounds. There's still multiple schools where they're still surveying the grounds. We just had a school last week that they found more graves, and this time not of just small children, but of babies. And my question was, what are babies doing in a graveyard at a school?
This is not good. They did very bad.
And so I remind people too, like when we come to Canada, especially as newcomers and things like that, when we're talking about Orange Shirt Day and listening to survivors and things like that, and we need to remember, if I went to your home countries, no matter how war-torn they would be, I would be treated better than the original person there because I'm not the original person there.
That's true.
The other thing we need to remember is we have not seen, when is the last time, please raise your hand, that you've seen the big migration of Indigenous people leaving Canada, if it's so bad here for us? Anytime in history, people can think of the big migration of Indigenous people leaving Canada? That is because we're not allowed to.
Yeah, exactly.
It is the law.
Kristi. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Harish.
So I was just thinking it is quite surprise, yeah. when the federal government started to function these type of residential school since 1880, yeah, but it did not come there notice, yeah. So many graves they later on found after 200 years, yeah. So it is quite surprise, quite amazing, yeah. What they, even the Pope, I think, did not apologize. Only few churches who are sponsoring these, yeah, supporting these type of residential school, they only apologize. But only few churches, and not so. Yeah. So Pope should openly apologize, yeah, to the native
That's the other
people,
thing.
indigenous native people. He should, yeah, First Nation they are called, even the First Nation people. He should apologize, yeah. But it never happened, I think so, yeah. Okay.
Any other
Kristi, so
questions? I just want to
I
make
have
sure
a
people
question.
don't-
I have a question, Kristi. My
Yeah.
question, Kristi, that in these modern times of such awareness of technology and voicing your opinions on social medias and such big and different platforms, like you are here with us right now as well. This is a huge platform, but for a limited community right now, in the sense that I hope this is one day becomes universal and we can help you share your grief as well. But my question is that in this today's era of such technology, don't you think the indigenous community could have done far more to voice their opinions about this discrimination, or is there a limitation for them? What is stopping them?
I have multiple answers on this. Number one, government controls everything. What were you taught about Indigenous people?
The same thing is what you're telling us right now in the history, but you see how we can portray the injustice of the society on such different platforms right now. Usually we do not even involve the government in such activities. Like we have Facebook,
Right.
Instagram. Yeah.
So the problem is one, there are numerous communities who do not have water, housing, technology, schools, libraries. To give you an example, as a children's author, one thing I go and teach people about all the time is the fact that Indigenous people, especially their children, have the lowest literacy rates of the world at this point. And that is because out of 631 communities, how many do you think have access to a school or a library?
Well, I wouldn't be able to guess. I guess you can give me a better answer.
Well, we would love to say all, or at least we would hope to, except
Yeah.
for it's only 47 communities across Canada out of the
Wow.
631.
Wow.
And another example is you have to remember, Indigenous people in Canada didn't even get the right to vote till 1960. So
Yes.
putting policies in place are all new for Indigenous people of Canada. And the fact that we're not Canadian citizens, I think Indigenous people are really to the point of, why should we continually, when we aren't even citizens here, take to the streets to tell the government to treat people fairly or how to spend your money?
No, it's not like about telling people how to spend their money, or maybe not even telling government, but like fighting for your own rights, right? This is
Right.
what community
But
do.
when we do, to give you an example, let's talk about today, okay?
Mhm.
Do we know what today is for
Mm,
Indigenous people? Anybody know what today is for Indigenous people?
no.
Can somebody Google MMIW October 4th and read that statement out, please?
MMI4?
MMIW October 4th.
Okay, missing or murdered. Okay, yes. Yeah, I heard that in news. I just skipped my mind. Missing or murdered Indigenous women, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, or any other names specific to a tribal community, such as, yes, let's read October 4th. So this is a day for all the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
Because we're hunted in Canada.
Sorry, go again.
Because we're hunted in Canada.
Wow.
To give you an example, right now, you've probably seen the hashtag, I may not understand it, search the landfills. There is a serial killer who is allowed
Yes.
to run wild in Winnipeg. He has killed multiple Indigenous women. He has
Yes.
thrown them into the landfill, and they're refusing to retrieve them. So now their proposal to us is that they would make the dump a memorial site for our Indigenous women. I have multiple, I'm sure you understand, issues with that. They have actually searched dumps for other people. My other thing is, as women and grandmothers and aunties, that I spent all day, because I've been to many events today. This is actually like my 4th or 5th event today. Because I do have my own MMIWG survivor story, so I am a huge advocate for MMIWs. My mother and myself were abducted when I was a child. And my thing is, there is a woman in the dump who is unnamed. She's unidentified. Her parents every day, her family could be hitting the streets every day still looking for her. And they are okay to not bother knowing who she is, to not bother telling their family who they are. Could you imagine searching the streets every day for your loved one, and they could be in a dump and nobody wants to blink an eye? And if it was your own family member, if this was your own history in a country that's supposed to be as great as Canada?
Yeah, we don't expect as immigrants to serve us this kind of an attitude if we're coming to Canada. This
And
is
on
beyond
purpose, as I said, because if Canada was truthful, we'd be declared a genocidal country. And anybody who knows, who's coming here, knows that immigrants don't pay to go to genocidal countries.
It's so unfortunate to learn the dark side of Canada.
It is, but you know what, Asma? I hope through education, I want everybody to know it's hard topics. But here's the thing, if I was learning about your countries, I'd want to dig deep, and I'd really want to learn what's really going on and how that affects, if I was living in your countries, how that would affect me day to day. So that's my thing, Asma, as you know, it's heavy and it's hard. But you know what? What people forget is history is always bound to repeat itself if we can't actually sit down and dig into the real history. And so when the real history still has Indigenous children dying in our backyards to this day, I say Canada has great architect, wonderful architecture. But if I blew up the buildings around, you would see the Indigenous children dying in the backyards. And that's the truth of Canada.
Kristi, if you don't mind me asking, like you just told us that you and your mother were abducted when you were young. So,
yeah,
abducted by whom? Would you like to throw some light on that too, if you don't mind?
A white man who became obsessed with my mother. Wow. And for 9 days, the police never looked for us because we are your typical story. When Indigenous women go missing, they either just ran away, went on vacation, ran off to prostitute.
Yeah.
Right now, in my own city, we have over 15 Indigenous women missing, and they don't seem to think there's a problem. If you want to search up later, there's a name I'm going to give you, Deborah Christian. She was killed by a London City police officer. Because he appealed his case, he is still sitting at the police department in my home city. Could you imagine having to pick up the phone and ask for help? Indigenous children know the number to a lawyer long before they will ever know the number to a mental health professional. Because they will be targeted. Because even at one time here in Canada, it was legal to hunt us. That's why we had to have a pass from the government. It was a little card to say we could leave the reserve.
So
I guess
actually,
that's so
they
shocking to
were
all of us that most of the audience is quiet today. Yes, yes, Harishji.
actually they were real owner of this lands here. So they were deprived their own lands. So by foreign invaders, they came from Britain, from French, and immigrants from these countries settled here in large number. Actually, shameful reminder of the systematical racism, discrimination, and continues to still they are facing in this country. So this is not good. Yeah. So they
And that's a
came to
lot of
this.
it is just,
Yeah,
yeah.
they came to this country 23,000 years back. Yeah, from island of Australia, from other country, Polynesia. But no, even they are real owner of this land. Yeah. So they were deprived from this ownership. Yeah, it's not good. So actually, I wanted to say about like this.
I
Thank you,
also
Harish.
remind everybody that is coming from countries that have really rich cultures and languages and ceremonies and all of that to remember that that's our biggest loss for Indigenous people in Canada. And the fact that I teach all the time that reminder how a government teaches their original people in the country they're in says a whole lot about how, in the end, they would treat everybody.
Yeah, today, Kristi, like we sit here in Canada, and when we call our parents back home, maybe, or our relatives, and we tell them, oh, we're so lucky here to be in Canada because it's one of the most just countries. But hearing the stories like you're just telling us right now, we had heard, of course, we were aware of the Indigenous history, but hearing every single story on the individual level, it does sadden you. And like Harish ji just said, it's very unfortunate. And I guess it's very, very shocking to all. So we don't have like happy comments to or any opinions to give you, or we don't have a voicer right now. Maybe later we can help create a voice for you, maybe, or help you voice your opinions to a wider spectrum. I hope there's a chance someday that Indigenous will not feel left out.
Exactly. And that's what I do through educating is because I think as communities who have such rich cultures and all of that, I think we could come together and could create amazing allyship if people, especially in Canada, understand before we get to reconciliation, we got to dig deep on the truth. Asma?
That's
Oh,
So I let just Birji say something.
Yeah.
I'll ask the question in the end. Just Birji.
Yeah, Kristi, hi, Kristi. Sorry, I
Hi.
joined a bit late, but Kristi, I just wanted to know your name. What is your full name? Kristi what?
White.
Sorry,
White.
pardon?
White.
Kristi
Kristi
White.
White.
Okay.
Would you like me to explain my name?
Yeah,
White.
no, I was thinking that you people have beautiful indigenous names. Why is there, sorry, I'm not trying to be nasty, but why are you using the name Kristi? That is not an indigenous name where maybe we can start by saying, okay, that is your so-called registered name, but it would be beautiful if you all have in brackets your native names, which are so wonderful, right? And then
I will
maybe,
do that.
we can go backwards in the sense that claim your names and then you start from there, because then you can be identified that this name sounds indigenous and you are carrying a name, a Christian name. But the sad thing is the Christianity was the one that broke you all. And finally, the Pope has admitted, but not openly. And you had a delegation that went there. I was following the delegation online 1 year ago, and you got back some artifacts from the Vatican that was stolen from the indigenous people. And there is a doctor, I have his name down, he's an indigenous doctor, and he uses his native name. He changed his name, and he is so brilliant. He say, I'm proud to carry my name. One. The other thing is they spoke in the indigenous language first, and then they got it interpreted into English. I think that would be a good start, in the sense that a name sounds very small, but I think it is such a big thing because it connects you with your ancestry, and you don't want your children to have names that have no relationship with their ancestry. And, I've been following, I have the honor to meet a Native American chief about 25 years ago at a world conference on religion and peace. And he used his native name. And even then, he wore his feathers and he was proud of wearing it. And I also know that the indigenous people even the men grow their hair long. They do not cut their hair. It is the same with us. We are Sikhs.
Yeah.
We do not cut our hair. There is a certain connection, I feel. There is a reason why you grow your hair long. There is a spiritual connection. And so, there are so many issues that you can start in a small way by moving forward. Why? You have heard of, sorry, I'm taking a bit of time.
No.
You have heard of David Suzuki.
Yep.
Right? He is
My grandma was friends with him.
Okay. He was such a brilliant person when it came to environment. He was an environmentalist. He was a champion for the environment. But for me, the indigenous people are born David Suzukis. Do you get that?
Yes.
You are David Suzukis on the day you are born. So you people should be the one teaching the so-called modern society how to live with Mother Earth. We should be learning from you, not vice versa. Yes, David Suzuki, I have a lot of respect for him, but he had to study it to become an environmentalist. But the native Indians were born with it, and they knew it. They knew it. They considered Mother Earth and the elements. They respected all the elements, including the animals. And when you sacrifice animal, you pray for it before you consume it.
Yeah.
It's all respect. So why are we losing all that? I think we are looking for an apology from the government. It doesn't hold any water. So what if I apologize to you? Kristi, I'm sorry, I did this 200 years ago. Does it affect you? No. It is just a word. And does the word carry through? No. So I don't know, maybe we are having the direction. I could be wrong. I apologize if I overstate some things, but we are barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
So in that sense, and I know that there are brilliant indigenous people out there, but they do not have enough support.
Yes.
That big group, the doctor who went to the United Nations, the indigenous people of North America took 9 years to consider yourself as a people. They never considered you a people.
Nope.
You were, in brackets, I don't want to say the word. What were you?
I will. Okay, so I'll explain what it said under the Indian Act in
Actually,
a nicer way.
yeah,
The
today's
definition
topic
was
is
a,
today's
a
topic is
human.
only indigenous truth and reconciliation. I think we are
Well,
behind this topic here. Now to change the name or like this, yeah. But
Actually, you know
only,
what we should do? We
yeah,
should, rather than apology, we should ask them to include everything, whatever we have learned from indigenous wisdom and all in the curriculum. Start from there, and they should be studying with all the First Nation kids, indigenous kids should be studying with everybody in a normal way, and they should study about their, and we all should study because we owe apology to this area, this part of the earth, because there's so much abuse has been done that everybody is suffering from some mental illnesses and everything and all, because their curses must be with us, because unless this is wiped out completely, new chapter hasn't started, we will all suffer, because one suffering, it's a domino effect, you know. That's why I'm so much thankful to them. Like still, they are there, and they didn't, like I did a blanket exercise a few days back, and it was so painful and so hurtful. Like, you know, it was same like India. Everywhere they went, they did that. You know, everywhere they tortured
yeah.
people. They wanted to make them English. What is English? Such a narrow, limited language. And like your language has so much knowledge, wisdom, medical, earth, love, respect, everything you respect, you know. And here you see people are throwing everything, like people are so depressed. Youngster, I just came from, I got late because of the traffic. So I saw young children fighting in the buses, throwing apples here and there. I was saying, where is the life? And there, your games are so important, those games. I went on that day, and it is so difficult to learn. So much brain is needed for those games. So children will be so
It is.
benefited.
So to jump in here for a minute, first off, I would like to, apparently I owe somebody a new introduction. Sa galinio gets yo jigel yolandalo onyat aga. I
That's
do
your name?
speak my language, and I do know my name. So my name, Yojigel, it means cloud.
Wow.
A lot of us are, they now have opened, one good thing with the government is they have opened up that we can revert back to our traditional names and go back to one name, which is excellent. I do use Kristi White a lot, and not usually, but I will make somebody happy. Normally, when I do introduce myself, I do say that is my Indian Act name and say Kristi White. So, but I also explain how we were given those names. The churches were giving out numbers. We were numbers for the longest time. I have family members that were like number 42 and number 36. And then we went from that to the nice Christian names. So we are establishing to get that back. As a children's author, I would say you have fantastic thinking, because one of the things I do with the books is they are released in Indigenous language, because you are absolutely right. And please, please, please go and have that conversation with so many more people, because I don't think people realize that, one, Indigenous people can thrive in Canada with
We should all
support.
go to City Hall and talk to there in front of everybody. A group should go there and talk, because it is long time overdue, pending. We owe to everything to these people, Indigenous people. We have taken everything from them. We cannot do that.
And the problem is too, is remember, because I mean, the government will say one thing and do another, because if they were to, you know, unfortunately, we will not give up the Indian Act. And people will ask me that all the time. Well, why would Indians of Canada want to live under the Indian Act? I need to make it clear of the reason that we end up, I guess, so choosing to live in poverty, not that it's a choice. But if the Indian Act is ever abolished, Canada owns everything in Canada. They own all the waterways, all the trees, all the oil. They will extract Canada from one end to another. And so that's why, unfortunately, Indigenous people are forced into this position. So one thing that, as was pointed out, because the Indian Act is still in effect to this day and controls, did you know Indigenous people weren't even allowed to be business owners until 2014?
It doesn't seem so surprising after all what we've heard for so far.
So that's why I always say, like, if you come across an Indigenous person that's got some sort of project on the go, as much as it may seem like a project at that time, a lot of us are really digging deep on trying to build projects that are going to prosper our people, right? They're going to advance our children, they're going to support our children. In Indigenous culture, all of us are taught to think of our next 7 generations, and that us standing here are responsible for our next 7 generations. And so that's why we have a responsibility to Mother Earth, and we have a responsibility to the water as women. We carry that water. Think of our babies. Our babies inside of us for 9 months are carried in what?
Kristi, Seema has a question, and then I have one too. Seema, you've been raising your hand for a long time now. I think it's about time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Sophia. I just want to say this is very sad, and I don't know what to say, but only I know this every religion, every culture, everyone is so beautiful. They have their own culture, their mind. But anyone, all have any one point you gave me, these things happen all when the universe or world is made it, human doing like these things. Anyone made one rule or regulation for respect everyone, because when we see the history, Hitler did this thing with the Jews, American did with this Japanese, and Muslim did with the Indians, Indians did with the Muslims, Afghanistan doing. Everyone is fighting with each other and try to let down everyone. And but anyone has any kind of one rule they do or apply for everyone. Why not we think with this? Uh, I accept your language. I accept your as a loved one because you are human like me. Your children is like my daughter. No difference between the blood and eye and brain and anything. But we all are doing this thing. If we see now, anyone has this any point, one point, give me any one thing. This is not you go and only speech. You go here and there and only speech. But what is the change inside with us? We do this. When
It's a
we
long.
said before we are very uneducated, now we are educated. It still is happening in the world. In
Yes.
India, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, any country you name. Only we are not here for the 1 or 2 hours and talk about this and say very sorry, but try to take out anything, apply for everyone, respect everyone or love everyone or accept everyone. I don't know which thing. Thank you so much.
Seema, you have a very valid comment here, but it's a long road ahead to justice, I guess. Uzma, you have a question?
Sophia, after you wanted to have a question as well.
Yes, Kristi, my question was, when you tell us so much about the injustice happening to the Indigenous, I want to know a few basic things. Like, for example, if you're sick, are you allowed to go to a hospital and get free treatment? Is that open for you or no, for Indigenous?
Okay, so that I'm going to
Just like
clarify right
just
now.
like how we are proud of the fact that if I'm sick, I'll get the doctor see me. Is it the same for you?
So we do have health coverage. We have the same health coverage. When they say Indigenous people have free health coverage, we have what's called NHIB. It is the same thing as ODB in Canada, which means we, especially in Ontario, my benefits are no different than somebody who's on Ontario Works or disability.
But not
So
as
we
a
get,
regular Canadian citizen.
so there's a different branch. So yes, they can say Indigenous people get free whatever, but if you go look at it, that's not the case at all. We get the same as they would give somebody on welfare or ODSP, which is open to anybody who has citizenship in Canada. And even if you don't have citizenship, there's still ways to access ODB, right? Which is Ontario Drug Benefits. So that's the thing that they don't say, is it's really no different. Like if I was to say not access the healthcare through my status card, it would be no different than if I went to the social services office and got that healthcare. And again, that was in treaties, right? The only reason why we have some things like healthcare and education is because we've lost clean water, housing, and education in return. To give you an example, like just so everybody understands, I'm going to reiterate my home community. Everybody can Google it, is Oneida Nation of the Thames. It is right outside of London, Ontario, and we've been under boil water advisory for 26 years.
Wow.
I, in my home community, have never been able to drink the water. So this isn't as much as people, especially Canada, would like to say that, you know, we can't apologize for 200 years ago. I definitely don't expect you to. But I honestly feel if you're Canadian and live in Canada today, and there are children with not even clean water, that should be a whole Canadian issue, which means you do play part in it. Because complacency can be just as detrimental. And that's happened in history in other countries where people will just turn a blind eye to what's really going on to the original people in the country. And that's what we have going on in Canada. The fact that people can sleep at night knowing there are children who are ending up with mercury poisoning from the water. There are children breaking out in rashes because they're tainted by garbage. To give you an example, my community doesn't have clean water. Because on a day where we think it's so beautiful and want to dance in the rain, what happens in my area is when it rains in London, there's sewage overflows and it goes down to the river and goes down to my home community and taints the water. And then on the back end of my reserve is Green Lane landfill. And they cart in Toronto's garbage to my community to poison our children. So this is not a 200-year ago issue. This is, as we are sitting here today, the government think the elders in my home community should have 1.5 liters of water a day. And that's to include cleaning themselves, brushing their teeth, doing their clothes, and eating. I challenge everybody to pour 1.5 liters of water tomorrow, and that's all you get to live off of.
So
Kristi?
like you said, Kristi, being neutral in the situation of injustice makes you as much as the culprit himself. Yes, Usma, you can go ahead, and then Madan uncle is waiting again.
So, Kristi, this is all, we know it's very sad. It's the reality which you are living, and our reality is different from your reality. Unfortunately, we are living here, I think 3.5 hours away, right?
Yeah.
So what we can do to change?
One thing I say is, one, have these conversations. They're hard, but as you're learning, educate the people next to you. You know, when you see Indigenous artwork and stuff and you see people, you ever notice that most of the people are shoulder to shoulder if they're sitting or they're standing? And that's because we as Indigenous people truly believe that we should all be equal. And you can't be equal if somebody's above or below. So one thing is because everybody, and the crazy thing is I thought for sure, especially other cultural identities in Canada would have had some sort of uproar when the Pope himself stated that Canadians are participating in this genocide right to today by their complacency. The Pope called everybody out and nobody blinked an eye. And so again, where do we realize that nothing will change if the people aren't actually educated, right? If we don't know that 80% of Indigenous families are living in poverty. And again, yes, 80% of Canadian families are living hand to mouth every single day. Because again, when you have to pay, to give you an example, in some northern communities, a family box of cereal is $15. A case of water is 36.
Population is 1,600,000, I think so, as per census of 2016. Yeah. So 80%, you can imagine how they are facing such atrocities. So,
You will not meet an Indigenous person who isn't living in poverty. It's almost like a facade. All of us
it's quite injustice
are.
To the native people, honor people of this country. Yeah. They are the real honor of this country.
So, Harish Uncle, I would like to mention here that in the beginning, as I said, that I was on Red FM radio, and when I said that we are having food drive for Indigenous family, I got a phone call from Jasbirji, who is here today. I'm so lucky, and he donated some blankets and toques and warm socks, which is in my car. I will bring on October 7th. October 7th, we are going to have an event. Voice of Men 360, they are hosting, and Walton Women Council is co-hosting with them the event. Please do come if you can. We are having food drive. I share it again and again in my all the WhatsApp group. If you can bring something, it will be wonderful. The list is there. So, Kristi, some people, they were asking that how come water is not there this time? Because last time they donated some cases and they still want to. And I said, bring whatever you want.
Please post this message on our WhatsApp group here.
I will.
We can know the location of the.
Sure. So I will.
Osma, also, we should have some interaction with the Indigenous, any of the Indigenous group. We would love that. Kristi, you should organize it for us, like we couldn't go and meet them. I would love to do that.
So October 7th, I already shared the flyer. Please do check it again. I will send it again. It's on October 7th.
We will have some Indigenous groups over there.
Yes, they are coming from, survivors are coming from, I believe, BC and Winnipeg.
Alberta.
Yeah.
Winnipeg. So we have actual 2 survivors coming in to share their actual stories. One of our men who's coming in was a residential school survivor. He spent 13 years in residential school. He's also sharing his story of what it was like to be the oldest sibling, because in residential schools, when you were there, you were not even allowed to acknowledge your siblings as your siblings. So even if you seen them being abused in the hallways, you could not react. You had to act. You could not say hello to them. It was eyes straight and keep walking. The thing about the water is we have to remember that why is there no water? You would have to get on the phone or start writing letters to your government officials, because if we donate water, that's great, except for the fact is that only lasts until it's gone. And so we remember that we don't ask for water donations to hold us over until we're going to get water, because that might be in 35 years. As of right now, Oneida has waited 26 years for water. And I'm sorry, but the donations of water that they get in the bottles have not lasted the last 26 years for every household. So as I said, in Oneida, we have about 500 houses and none of them have water. And so you have to think, even at 4 people per family, per those amount of houses, how much water would we need? And like I said, the thing is when you really pour 1.5 liters of water in front of you, and that's all you're allowed to use for a day, tell me how long a case of water that's been donated is going to go to a whole community. We have babies. Remember, there's lots of things we don't think of when it comes to water. If we needed a bottle of formula right now, what would you do? If your child needed a glass of juice, what would you do? We don't have that luxury because we can't use the water to even mix things. The water cannot be used. It is poison.
Yes, Mother Uncle, you've been waiting, and then we'll take Prabha, that is, I think. Yes,
Thank
Mother
you
Uncle.
very much. And thanks to Kristi, I was listening to you. A couple of questions run through my mind, and I will ask for forgiveness first. It's nothing to point to anybody or any community at all. First is about the water you're talking about. Like wherever your area is, I don't know exactly, forgive me for that. What about the next door community who is joining your area? How the water they get, where the water they get from?
Okay,
There must be
so
some source of water for them. Is that water also a dirty water or murky water, or is it just your area is a polluted water?
only reserve areas. So
okay, your
I'll
reserve
tell you,
area is a polluted water. What about the next door to you, who is joining properties, joining community next to you? Is their water clean water?
yeah, because it's a township
Okay,
and run by the
how
government.
come, my question is,
Okay, so hang on one sec, Madden. I just want to explain. Do you know where London is? London, Ontario?
yeah, I know London, where London is, but don't ask me in detail, but know where it is in geography.
But you know where London is?
Yes.
That is the next town to my home community.
Okay, if the water comes to London, where the water comes from there, London? They have some kind of...
Because they never hooked it up onto the reserve.
They have some reserve, some ponds or something cleaning system, right?
So
London has some
water
cleaning
for
system.
town,
The water is being pumped to that London
right?
area.
But the water,
Let me
is not.
clarify, Kristi, let me clarify what Mother and Uncle means. Mother and Uncle means that London is here and then your community is just next to it. So if London is getting clean water, why is not your community? Mother and Uncle, what Kristi is trying to tell you is that the government organized the stuff for London, but they never even crossed this one street to go to their community to organize things.
I can literally take you to my community, and we can stand on the side of the road that my community is on, and there's no water access except for a water tower and treatment plant.
Is any water can be drilled down into the ground and pumped out? Is there any possibility of that?
Everything can be done if the government wants it to.
No, it can't. So I'll explain that. In my community, we would actually need a really big system. I'm not sure if you were here earlier when I was speaking about the contamination water in London. So the reason our water in Oneida Nation of the Thames is contaminated is because when the treatment plant here in London overflows its sewage, the sewage part goes downstream down the Thames to Oneida Nation of the Thames, my home community. So the sewage of London is contaminating. And then on the back side of our reserve, so where the water table is, Green Lane put a dump and is bringing all of Toronto's garbage there. So it made our water tower and our water tablet, it's all tainted. If you search Oneida Nation of the Thames and water, it would actually, you would see that we've been under, the longest one we've been under is this last stint was 26 years bottled water advisory. We can literally cross the road to the farmers and they have water. Government did not hook up water onto the reserves. What people are forgetting is the fact that what their whole plan here was to get rid of their Indian problem so that way they could control all the resources. Because once the Indian Act is eradicated and there's no more Indians, they own all resources in Canada.
Well,
It's a genocide.
That's a
well,
targeted torture.
Yeah, it's a
I,
targeted genocide.
but
Yes.
I do not know about that, what it is, and I mean, everybody can say that. One thing I was also listening to you and some other people as well. This is again from my common sense point of view.
Yep.
That when foreigners came to Canada, Britishers, French, and other nations, obviously the natives did not like it. And they tried to force their culture onto the natives and try to make them obey whatever they believe in, right?
Did you, were you here at the beginning?
I was in the beginning, I was listening some
Okay.
of them,
So
something I
it
may have
started
missed
with
later.
okay, so we, the doctrine of discovery is where it
Yeah.
started. And it was because they, all around the world, not just in Canada, stated if they found land and people, if they were not practicing Christians, they could overtake them.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying, that whoever came, they tried to
Yeah.
practice their own beliefs.
Yeah.
That's what I said. You know, when whoever come, now, I
Yeah.
think that the immigrants who are coming to Canada now on the last 100 years or 200 years, they are doing the same thing. They are trying to bring their beliefs, they are
Yeah.
trying to impose their beliefs onto the people who are in Canada, who don't believe in that.
Yes.
This is in human nature. It's happening to since we are born, since this
Exactly.
earth is born, right? One community, whoever it is in power or in majority, they try to impose their own so-called cultural laws, religious laws, natural laws, whatever you call them. Because if they don't do that, they can't control it.
Yeah.
And the idea is of everybody who comes there to anyone, anywhere, is to control.
Right.
If they
Which is
can't
why
control, they
everybody,
may force it. If they can't control with love, they may force it. And that's
right.
what I believe, and you are feeling, and I'm with you, that the government, current government or the past governments, they're doing the same thing to indigenous people to control them, if not with the love, then with the force.
Yeah.
That's what my thinking is. But that's the all humanity does it.
Yes.
One humanity
And so
to another
that's one
humanity.
thing. Yep. And that's one thing we wanted to, like I did point out in the beginning too, is I completely agree with you on that. And so we had a treaty way back when the Europeans first came, and you can look it up, and it's called the Two-Row Wampum. And I think honestly, the whole world should look up that, because what it was is we see it all the time. It's a flag and it's white, and then you see a purple line, and then white, and then a purple line and a white. And you see that for Indigenous people all the time. What that actually is a treaty of what we call the two-row canoe. So when you look at those purple lines, those are your canoes. And so what we always believed is that people could travel parallel with each other and not have to cross in each other's lanes and overtake each other. We truly believed that there could be, but again, I think that's what got us like to the bottom of all of this, is maybe believing in that too much, right? But again, it's the fact that, as I stated, in everybody's home country, especially if, you know, you immigrated over here and whatever, it's kind of like, what would you want your government to listen to on how the people are being treated there and whatever is going on there, right? So it's the same sort of thing of what's going on in Canada, is the fact that Canada has been able to sell this story for so long without the truth. And now it's a fact that, like, what other country has a 3-tiered legal system? Because Canada does. You have Canadian law, you have immigration law, and you have Indian Act law. And there is no other country that would put up with that kind of division, especially as a legal stance, except for Canada. I sit on commissions at the UN. I speak on a UN platform around this stuff. And I have had other countries look and go, we just don't get what Canada is doing. Even our own people who live in Canada, we don't get why they ain't taken to the streets, because if they were in their own country and this was going on, it would be dealt with so much differently. And that's what I remind everybody is I really hope that one day I can do for you guys what I'm asking you to do for Indigenous people. I hope I can dig deep into your home countries and really understand the issues of your original people and really be a good ally. But in order for any of us to do that, we have to come together, shake hands, learn the truth of each other. You have to think, do you know how many Indigenous people know nothing about your countries? Do you know why that is? Because remember, the same person who taught you about Indigenous issues is the one teaching us about you. So if you want to believe everything the Canadian government sells you, just think about the story they're selling us on you guys.
Well, that's a human nature again, divide and rule.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's a
and
common
so that's
human
why
nature. I say it's a human
right.
nature, not one thing. And about
Oh,
the
yeah.
treaty, about the treaties you're talking, government
Yeah.
politics, they change these treaties, they overrule the treaties after a certain
The
period,
crazy
after
thing is,
certain
though,
time.
is the reason you're right, because the reason they overthrew those great treaties when it came to inclusion and stuff is because they weren't held by the government. They were traditional, right? So of course the government went, oh, no, we can't have this kind of theory going on. And I get it. Like, I agree with you. It happens in many communities around the world. My main thing is because we are living in Canada, and believe me, I really want the country that all my ancestors come from and form to be the beautiful vision that people seem to think around Canada. I would love that to be true. And I
Wish
will
you all
work
the best.
tirelessly to
I
get
wish you
there.
all the best. And
Kristi, you are
before I
not
go
allowed
to
I-
dear Uzma, I send you a check of $50 for this cause.
Thank you, Mother.
I will
Thank
mail
Uzma,
it
can
to
I ask
you.
one question? Uzma, can I ask one question?
Just wait a second. Prabhaji was.
Prabhaji is waiting.
Okay,
Yes.
So after that, we will take your question.
Prabhaji?
She's not there. Meanwhile, somebody was asking me where to drop the stuff. So it's, I will share in my groups as well. It's 2985 Drew Road between 9 to 5 tomorrow and on Friday, because on 7th we are meeting them and we want to give everything on 7th. And if you are coming on 7th, the address is Malton Community Center, 3540 Morningstar Drive in Malton, Mississauga. Kristi, is there any preference for gift cards? Last time
No.
it was Tim Hortons.
Yeah, really anything. One thing, if it's towards like school snacks for the families and stuff, Walmart's a good one, but just because we have a Walmart superstore that's closer to the reserve, so it makes it a little easier for the families to get to. And of course,
Okay.
because it's a super center, they have like food and clothes and stuff.
And Kristi, we will bring you again, because these conversations should be not just one day. It is ongoing conversations, because this is only we can do right now. And
that's what I remind everybody is it took Canada 150 years to get into this position with Indigenous people. We're not getting out of it overnight. So what I remind everybody is some of the simple things you can do is share the knowledge. Education, as we know, in the way of history is a beautiful thing. So share. There is a book that I always, whenever I come to speak, it's called 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act. They also have an audio version of it. It's a good way to catch up. The Truth of Reconciliation website, they have so much information there that they're sharing now. And again, just any Indigenous person, whether, you know, you're walking by somebody on the street and they're a little stone carver and, you know, they're selling their goods over ever, that literally is what they're going to go home and take care of their family with every day. And the fact that support and uplift and educate, those are the best things we can do for anybody.
Yeah, Kristi, one more thing. This is about land acknowledgement. Everywhere we go, they start with land acknowledgement. So my question is what we can do beyond that land acknowledgement. And to be very honest, some people, when they say they don't know how to pronounce and they don't know what they are saying. So what is your views about this?
Oh, I have some differing views from this. We have to remember, it's been a lot of political, again, a lot of agencies and stuff are only doing land acknowledgements because the cities and the municipalities have had to say they have. What I do encourage people to do is if they are doing land acknowledgements, right? Really, really, it's a fact of really appreciating and acknowledging the history that is there, the land you are standing on and the people who are originally there. I will say land acknowledgements for some people, it doesn't go over well because it's starting to feel almost like it's just redundant. It's like you said, a lot of people don't understand what's going on. And then on the same hand, some of them can be worded poorly and it may just seem like you're standing there acknowledging that you're standing on stolen land, but aren't doing anything. So again, in land acknowledgements, the main thing is just to really acknowledge the people and the place you're on, right? And to remember that there was an original people, because that's what we're supposed to be acknowledging in those land acknowledgements. It's not so much about always being able to pronounce the names of the people and whatever. It's the respect point of acknowledging that there were original people there first. And so how it doesn't look like you're just standing there saying we're on stolen land and that's okay is by doing those extra things. As I said, like having conversations, even like that, asking coworkers what they think about land acknowledgements. Is there something a little more personal that teams could get together and add into it so it doesn't just seem like, you know, cookie cutter? And again, I think that's just a lot of it is going to be about sharing. It's going to be about learning as we go. That's one thing I really wanted to make clear to everybody is that Indigenous people, a lot of us are just learning our history because a lot of our, including our parents, were so traumatized in the system that they never talked about it. For myself, I can give an example. It wasn't until last year that I really thought about the fact that I never knew where my mother went to school. She never even mentioned schooling growing up. And that was because of the effects of the residential school system on them. So there's many people who in our communities are just learning what even our own family members went through. So we don't expect everybody to be caught up fully. As I said, it was 150 years plus to get here. But again, like just putting your heart into it, Asma, does that make sense? Like really putting your spirit behind it and remembering what those land acknowledgements are supposed to be about, and the fact that there are people willing in this country to be the most oppressed people, so that way we can have the beautiful Canada that we have, right? We have beautiful waterways and forests and just all our resources, and we need that for our next generations because they cannot drink oil or water, or they cannot drink oil or money. They need water. We all need water. We need air. So yeah, all in all, Asma, I think it's who you ask.
I just want to ask you one question, like I asking everyone. So like Prime Minister, like he has no power to supply water, because it doesn't mean that if you supply water, you'll take the land from them. What kind of treaty is that? Because everybody gets water, is a basic necessity of life, and nature gives it. Nobody gives that water. So why they're doing like that? Like, what is the problem here?
Well, one thing is it's the Canadian government that actually runs and controls the Indian Act. A lot of people don't realize when that little quote I put up about Sir John A. Macdonald and taking children from their families to turn them into like proper non-Indigenous children, who signed off on that order? That's an interesting piece of history again. That was Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
But
Pierre
this
Elliott
Trudeau cannot do
Trudeau.
anything now. But can we all go and, like, it's a humanity, it's a human question. It's not something we are asking to give him his money and all. Like,
Yep.
it's a basic need. So can't we all go there and talk to them? And like, why it is like, it is disgusting to know that it is hurting.
Absolutely.
Like, we are
I
wasting water
absolutely
here.
encourage everybody, any politicians you talk to, start asking them hard questions about what is going on with Indigenous people, what's going on with the Indian Act. And you'll start realizing that a lot of politicians who aren't specifically dealing with the Indian Act are also as guilty of this complacency. One thing I remind everybody to look at is when we look at Canadian politics and the structure, why do we have a Governor General? The Governor General speaks for who?
Prime
The British
Minister.
monarchy.
For the Queen. For the
Yeah.
Queen.
Right.
For the Queen.
And what would the only business now in this year and age does Canada have with the Queen?
But
Yeah.
Queen is, I think it's going to go away. This system won't last forever. Because I don't know monarchy is going to live forever now. People are getting aware of it. I don't know how
Well,
long Canada
and the
will
problem
get aware.
is that the biggest thing is for us all to win, unfortunately, is really supporting Indigenous people from the inside out, because what they want is a complete genocide. Well, we are at 7% of the population of all of Canada. And if you know statistics, they're not that far off. So what we need is allies on the ground to start swinging this the other way. We have high rates of suicide. We call it system suicide because our people know that they can only get so far and they're not going to get any further because the system has made it to be that way. So I think with more support and uplifting, especially of Indigenous children and youth, that strives them to be better and to strive for better things and know that they're important. And then they have families, and then we start having more Indigenous children. And I mean, that's how you make population strong again. But I think until we can really get Canadians to see that we are steps away, if you know about genocides in other countries, only being 7% of the Canadian population, we got to dig deep.
Yeah. Very sad affair. It's so sad. We are living in this country and we're not able to do anything. And I feel bad when I see that we are having all the facilities and the land which belongs to those people, they have nothing. They have been deprived of everything. Such a great injustice, and we are a part of it. Directly, indirectly, we are part of it.
Yes,
Exactly.
Prabha.
So that's why I say.
Actually, yeah. Yeah, I just want to say only one thing. I'm listening all the things, and I'm just thinking, okay, you are the person who has just explained me everything. Thank you for that. At least I come to know what is going on. I didn't know about that. And I just want to give you the congratulations that you have a power to come in front of us and say against this government, and you just want to raise your voice. So I just salute you for that, and continue your things and go place to place. As I have listened first time all these things. I didn't know anything. Whatever I can do for that, I will try to do. I will just want to spread out how far I can do, and I just want to give you the blessings to you and your people. I just want to give you blessings that God will do something for you. I am all the prayer person. I'll do prayer for you, and just want to give you blessings. And one thing I just want to say, 5 things: water, sun, fire, wind, earth.
Yep.
And these all things are 5 things are very free from the God side. If water is not coming to you, you can do one thing, that the cement, you make the walls and this ground, and rain will come. Rain used to come. Nobody can stop raining. So you can store the water. We used to do that type of in India also. For the summertime, it is lack of water. So we do that type of to make ourselves comfortable, because 5 things are from God's side. We are God people. Everyone is
Yes.
belong to God directly, very directly.
So the crazy thing about that is we would all absolutely 100% agree with you, because we are land-based. But through the Indian Act and through times, they've actually made specifically certain things illegal that Indigenous people would prosper. So we are actually not allowed to collect rainwater on reserves. It's illegal.
The water from nature, you are not allowed to do that.
It's illegal.
Okay.
What she means to say basically that the system is incorrect. The system is creating all the trouble. So we need to bring a change in the system to make it easier for them.
So that's why I said it actually is probably easier to change the people than the system, because once the people wake up and take to the streets. See, one thing I teach in Canada is we always forget that in Canada, one of the great things about Canada is those politicians are supposed to work for Canadians. Canadians paid them to do their job. So that's why I remind everybody, when you're talking to your local politicians, remind them they're to be working for you. And if there are children in Canada without water and you're not okay with that, then they need to dig deep for you. And don't let them tell you for not 1 second that one of your pennies are going into that, because again, they have money there. They are purposely choosing to not do it.
Yes, Geeta ji, you've been waiting. You've been raising your hand. Geeta.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, slightly, yes.
I am very much amazed to see that Indigenous people are so much neglected in a country which is said to be so benevolent, so kind and everything. But what is this? The people of the land should be honored. I think everybody should be honored. And no water scarcity should be there in any house. Children without good water, healthy water, cannot survive. Everybody is important for a person who is ruling the country. I think that way. I'm very sad to know about your conditions. And this is the first time I am hearing about the Indigenous people. I Googled and found what is Indigenous and what is it. I want to know more about you. And you should raise your voice. You have to raise your voice. If you raise your voice, then somebody from the government who is humane and kind may listen to you. Everybody is not bad, in any community.
No.
Everybody is not bad. Everybody doesn't look after their own profit or benefit. There are people with large heart. So we should think that we should talk about our children first, because then the next generation, they will also contribute for the upliftment of the country. Among them, one may be the next prime minister. Who knows?
I know. Last night we made history. We got our first Indigenous premier, and there were people crying all over Canada last night. As a mom myself, sorry guys, it's emotional to see that man win last night.
Yeah, but you have to speak among your group,
hopefully.
And everybody should be educated so that at least they can converse in English and tell their ideas to the government. You're taking the people who are responsible, who will look after your needs.
Geeta ji, she's sharing her emotions. So let's listen to her.
I'm sharing my emotions and I'm quite troubled. And today I may not sleep because I can't think a child without good water. I can't think. I'm very liberal
Exactly.
in my mind, and I also do work for the people who are Adivasis, like Indigenous. There are Adivasis in our village also. They're very friendly with me. All the maids, all the downtrodden people are very friendly with me because I am really sympathetic for their things, and I truly add to their little comfort. I can't do anything. At this stage, I can't do. I wish I had done it long time before. You
So-
see? So this is a chance to equip yourself and be brave to confront your difficulties in a proper way. It should come out.
Geetaji,
How
Geetaji,
to-
this is what she's telling, that how they are taking the steps and
Yeah.
what a big achievement yesterday. Yes, Kristi, please share.
Yes, Kristi, you are wonderful, and I think we are all enriched by your knowledge about the Indigenous people. I want to know about all the Indigenous people, even from Australia and other places also. There are people who are suffering, and we should contribute and we should uplift them so that they don't feel alone. No.
Kristi, you can tell them how to go through blanket thing, which is very, very powerful to know that it was so much I couldn't sleep for 4, and now it is bothering me. Same thing about water, that children are living without water in this country.
What is blanketing? I don't know.
It's a blanket exercise. I would actually, anybody who can make it out to what's called the blanket exercise is by Kiros. And you actually walk through the history, and it's done in just such a profound way that really starts explaining, because you're actually part of the history because you play a character amongst this place. So honestly, that is another thing. If anyone has a chance to go and do a blanket exercise, I would highly recommend it. It gives you a really good look at some of the histories that's gone on.
Kristi, I'll
As
invite
I
you for that.
Yes, see, they're beautiful, and you learn so much. As I was saying about last night with Wob Canoe, right? His win. And I'm sure you can see on his mother's face, like there's just been so much sharing today that the fact, as a Indigenous mother myself, I bet you every step of the way of loving and supporting him, she never thought that he would be a premier ever. The change that could happen with Wob Canoe is just, I mean, the fact that history was made last night for Indigenous people across Canada, for our children. And if you get a chance to go and listen to his speech, then you'll see it was a lot of like what I said here, that this is change, that our children will see that they're worth something. And Wob Canoe is going to lead that pathway. And as I said, the best thing everybody else can do is just, like we've been saying, share, support, uplift, learn more, dig deep. It is heavy. There are times like blanket exercises where you may not sleep for a couple days. Believe me, I've been in the same experience. But I really, truly believe in my own story that part of it is that Indigenous people of Canada and newcomers could make history changes for Canada if they could become allies and just share and uplift and support. Because I figured in my whole journey of really starting to dig deep and educating newcomer families and stuff was the fact that they would have an understanding from their own countries what it was to be a grandmother, a mother, an auntie, a dad, a grandpa, a brother, and know that children are living in such poverty and being ripped from their culture and their language and their ceremonies that we know are so important to cultured children in their everyday lives, in every situation. You know, there's things we don't look about in this Canadian history, like other than those who know Jay and Gizmo. Here's a good example. Our survivors have stated time and time again, one thing that Canadians don't see that Canada took away from them and has still not given back is childhood. We don't see Indigenous characters for our children. On top of that, all of our aunties and grandmas and whatever, when's the last time you walked down the street and seen children just playing, blowing bubbles, skipping, playing those hand games? That wasn't in a child designated area. Well, remember, there were also Indian designated areas. And so one thing we can all do too is remember to really, really advocate for Indigenous children, because one thing the system has targeted time and time again for our communities is our children. They have literally ripped our children from their mother's arms. They have stolen them. They have sent them to other parts of the world to never connect again. And I think it's not just our responsibility as Indigenous people to dig deep and to support and uplift our children under a system of oppression that is still doing exactly what it was meant to do to this day. And that is eradicate the Indian. And yes, it's heavy, but remember again, you know, I have parents who say to me all the time about, should our children be learning this in school? Well, should somebody's 4-year-old have been ripped from their arms? Our children have to live with this every day. And we forget at the end of Orange Shirt Day, Indigenous people don't get to fold up their trauma and put it away till the next year. And so that's what we can do. We can share, we can love, we can support, we can uplift, and we can dig deep. And we can always remember who's selling this story and what parts do they really want you to know. Because again, remember what we're taught about your home countries.
Actually, they have put such a bad image that they drink and they're lazy. And because we have been working with them for a long time, when I was teaching in QP, we used to go and give a lot of stuff there, stationery, books, and food and everything. But like when I saw the conditions there, that they didn't even have lights there.
Yep. I grew up in
So
a
like,
home that didn't have electricity, didn't have running water, was condemned. That was my childhood home. And that was okay to the government of Canada because I had a serial number. Because even you have to remember, our status card numbers are based off of blood quantum. So we've been given a serial number, just like a horse, a pig, a cow, anything that has bloodline in Canada. And I remind people all the time that because it's a serial number that completely identifies me by my ethnicity, if I tattoo it on myself, would it be a different story?
We should talk about it. Actually, the sin number, when sin is a very bad word in our culture. So when I came sin, so I thought we must have done some sin. Now I know what sin we have done it. I always used to think, why sin? Like it's a social insurance number, but sin, So I was very new to the first day when I said sin. I said, my mother said that the people who leave their motherland, they must have done something, some kind of sin. That's why they leave their motherland. And I don't know whether you'll be able to come back or not. So that thing now I'm saying maybe there is some purpose, like we should do something about it. It is really, really very sad, 150 years, and you are still fighting, and thank God you are fighting because of Indian Act. You are staying in poverty because of all of us. So the worst part is that we all will be benefited by it to keep the Canada safe and happy and prosperous. But what about you guys?
So it is 6:30, and Kristi, I know it will be a heavy evening for most of us. It will be with a hope that, as you said, that last night it was the victory. that eventually it will be a victory here. Thank you so much, and especially those people who are sending me text that they are supporting that food drive. Thank you so much. And Sobhya, back to you.
Yes, I would like to conclude this session today because it was such a heavy session. We're all emotional. So I would like to say a few very important words. It is nothing personal. My words are not personal, but everybody should wear the crown if it fits them. Injustice is a disgrace to humanity, be it any language, religion, or society. It will take a long, hard journey to get to the fair world, even though we know we've been to Mars and moons more. We know how what Mars and moon looks like more than what our neighbor has eaten in the night. Being neutral in the situation of injustice makes you as much as a criminal as the culprit himself. When we say all lives matter, then actually we should mean all lives, be it white, black, brown, or indigenous. I would like to thank you, Kristi, my esteemed guest. The least we could do is feel empathy. It is our basic right to believe, practice, as long as it is practiced in harmony. You can believe whatever and as much as you want to. As much as it is a human nature to divide and rule, it is our responsibility to do whatever we can to change it, and not just accept it, but also implement it towards the change. And individual change will ultimately change the system. That's exactly what we need. The world is as much yours as it is mine. And you and I are as much indigenous as Kristi is. Thank you, Kristi.
Beautiful,
Thank you.
beautiful, beautiful.
I just wrote that in my font.
It was absolutely
Thank you.
beautiful. And you're right. Right. And that's honestly what it's just all about is love, light, support, and uplifting of all humanity.
Thank you, Kristi. It was an honor.
Beautifully said, Sobhya.
Thank you. Thank you. It was
Beautifully said.
So we are very well said, Sobhya, because nothing belongs to us. We are just a traveler, you know. Actually,
Yeah.
we cannot have those acts, you know. I don't know. Where
Yes.
is our humanity gone? Thank you.
Uzma,
Thank you, Kristi. It was an honor meeting you. Hope to see you soon. And hopefully we'll be there on the 7th October function. Hopefully we can.
I look forward to seeing whoever can make it out to the function.
Sorry, what did you say, Kristi?
I said I look forward to whoever can make it out to the function.
Yes. Yes, we're really looking forward to the function. Hope to see you all. I hope most of us can make it there.
Please
Uzma?
put the details in the WhatsApp.
जी, I will.
उस्मा
Thank
मैं
you.
आपसे कहना चाह रही थी कि मैं भी हेल्प करना चाहती हूँ आप मेरे से अगर कांटेक्ट करो
जी,
तो
मैं जी.
I will also want to do something.
Thank you so much.
Kristi, can we donate some stationery, pencils, like brand new things? Can we donate that too? Okay.
Yep.
And I have a lot of books because I was teaching. So I don't know whether those books are like, those are Robert Munch and all children's story, but I don't know whether we should give that book. I wish we could read your story books in English, so that would be better.
Kristi, are you bringing
If you
your
make it,
books?
Sorry?
yeah, I was going to say I'm bringing the books to the event. So if you do make it out
Okay.
to the event, you can look at my books.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
everybody.
some-
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's time to end the session,
Thank
I
you.
guess. Thank you, Kristi. Thank you once again. Thank you so much.
Good luck,
Thank you,
Kristi.
everyone.
you.
Thank you for your support and love. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.